benar sering disebarkan selama masa perang. Saudara-saudari, kita sedang berperang. Kita harus berjuang keras demi iman kita, karena hal ini menyangkut kehidupan kita.
Siapakah musuh utama organisasi Saksi Yehuwa, atau yang dikenal juga dengan nama organisasi lembaga Menara Pengawal? Menurut pemimpin tertinggi organisasi ini yang menyebut diri mereka sebagai badan pimpinan, musuh organisasi ini adalah para mantan anggota mereka sendiri dan media-media massa yang memberitakan hal-hal yang negatif dan buruk tentang organisasi ini. Oleh karena itu, pemimpin tertinggi Saksi Yehuwa memerintahkan para anggotanya agar para mantan anggota ini, yang disebut dengan istilah orang-orang murtad, wajib dijauhi dan dikucilkan. Demikian juga media-media massa harus dihindari sebisa mungkin. Perhatikan pernyataan dari salah satu pemimpin tertinggi Saksi Yehuwa berikut ini.
Nah, kadang ada situasi yang mungkin membuat kita sulit menolak bacaan dari orang-orang murtad. Coba pikirkan skenario berikut. Pelajar Alkitab kita dikirimi link tentang situs orang murtad oleh suaminya. Lalu suaminya berkata kepada istrinya, "Coba lihat ini, nanti kamu akan tahu mereka seperti apa." Pelajar Alkitab kita khawatir, dan dia mau kita coba periksa situs itu. Jangan lakukan itu. Paulus berkata, hindari mereka. Jadi, kita seharusnya tidak membaca bacaan orang murtad, atau mencari tahu apa pendapat mereka tentang kita di internet.
Dan lucunya, bahkan orang-orang yang sedang belajar dengan saksi-saksi Yehuwa, yang disebut sebagai peminat, juga dihambat untuk membaca atau mendengar berita tentang saksi-saksi Yehuwa dari media massa ataupun dari orang-orang murtad. Sebaliknya, para peminat itu didorong untuk mengenal organisasi ini serta para anggotanya lebih mendalam lagi. Mari kita dengar lanjutan dari khotbah itu.
Coba pikirkan skenario berikut. Pelajar Alkitab kita dikirimi link tentang situs orang murtad oleh suaminya. Lalu suaminya berkata kepada istrinya, "Coba lihat ini, nanti kamu akan tahu mereka seperti apa." Pelajar Alkitab kita khawatir, dan dia mau kita coba periksa situs itu. Jangan lakukan itu. Paulus berkata, hindari mereka. Jadi, kita seharusnya tidak membaca bacaan orang murtad, atau mencari tahu apa pendapat mereka tentang kita di internet. Jadi apa yang bisa kita katakan? Kita mungkin bisa bilang begini, "Saya tahu ini pasti membuat kamu bingung dan khawatir. Dan kamu memang perlu tahu kami seperti apa. Saya punya saran. Tidak ada yang kami tutupi. Waktu kamu berhimpun, dengarkan baik-baik apa yang dibahas di sana. Perhatikan cara kami bergaul. Cari tahu cara organisasi dibiayai. Coba lebih mengenal para penatua dan istri mereka. Waktu pengawas wilayah dan istrinya datang, coba kenalan dengan mereka. Kunjungi kantor pusat atau kantor cabang. Nanti saya bisa temani. Saya mau kamu benar-benar mengenal organisasi Yehuwa. Karena dengan begitu, nanti kamu akan tahu bahwa apa yang orang-orang katakan tentang kami tidak benar."
Bukankah ini aneh? Misalnya Anda ingin membeli sebuah mobil mewah dan mendatangi sebuah showroom mobil ABC untuk mencari informasi tentang merek mobil mewah tersebut. Tentunya, sebelum Anda membeli mobil merek ABC itu, bukankah hal yang wajar jika Anda ingin beroleh informasi sebanyak mungkin tentang kualitas mobil itu? Informasi wajib Anda tahu, baik dari kompetitor mobil itu ataupun dari media massa lainnya. Bukankah aneh jika salesman mobil ABC itu malah mengajak Anda untuk mengetahui lebih mendalam tentang pabrik mobil ABC dan para stafnya? Sebagai orang yang berdaya nalar baik, bukankah Anda semestinya curiga dengan perusahaan mobil itu yang tidak memperbolehkan pembelinya memperoleh informasi dari pihak kompetitornya ataupun media massa yang membahas tentang mobil itu? Jika memang mobil merek ABC itu terbaik, semestinya, pabrik mobil itu tidak perlu takut jika ada orang yang ingin memeriksanya. Jika pabrik mobil ABC itu takut, sudah semestinya kita curiga. Ada pepatah yang mengatakan, berani karena benar. Nah, demikian juga organisasi Saksi Yehuwa ini. Jika memang organisasi ini mengklaim sebagai sebuah organisasi Kristen yang terbaik dibandingkan dengan organisasi Kristen lainnya, tentunya organisasi ini tidak perlu takut jika ada orang yang memeriksa dan mengujinya. Sebaliknya, jika organisasi ini merasa takut diperiksa dan diuji, maka ini membuktikan bahwa organisasi ini patut dicurigai.
Jadi apa yang bisa kita katakan? Kita mungkin bisa bilang begini, saya tahu ini pasti membuat kamu bingung dan khawatir. Dan kamu memang perlu tahu kami seperti apa. Saya punya saran. Tidak ada yang kami tutupi. Waktu kamu berhimpun, dengarkan baik-baik apa yang dibahas di sana. Perhatikan cara kami bergaul. Cari tahu cara organisasi dibiayai. Coba lebih mengenal para penatua dan istri mereka. Waktu pengawas wilayah dan istrinya datang, coba kenalan dengan mereka. Kunjungi kantor pusat atau kantor cabang. Nanti saya bisa temani. Saya mau kamu benar-benar mengenal organisasi Yehuwa. Karena dengan begitu, nanti kamu akan tahu bahwa apa yang orang-orang katakan tentang kami tidak benar.
Jangan jadi korban propaganda. Orang bodoh percaya segala sesuatu. Amsal 14 ayat 15. Ada perbedaan yang besar, antara pendidikan dan propaganda. Pendidikan menunjukkan caranya berpikir. Propaganda memberitahu Anda apa yang harus dipikirkan. Pendidik yang baik menyajikan setiap sisi permasalahan dan merangsang diskusi. Para propagandis tak henti-hentinya memaksa Anda mendengarkan pandangan mereka dan menghindari diskusi. Motif mereka seringkali tidak tampak. Mereka menyeleksi fakta-fakta, memanfaatkan yang berguna dan menyembunyikan yang lain. Mereka juga menyimpangkan dan membengkokkan fakta, spesialis dusta dan hal-hal yang tidak seluruhnya benar. Target mereka adalah emosi Anda, bukan kesanggupan berpikir Anda yang logis. Para propagandis tak henti-hentinya memaksa Anda mendengarkan pandangan mereka dan menghindari diskusi. Itulah yang dilakukan oleh organisasi Menara Pengawal yang terus-menerus memaksa kita untuk mendengarkannya agar kita mengabaikan para kritikus yang sebenarnya menyampaikan fakta kebenaran tentang organisasi ini. Organisasi ini berupaya menutup diskusi terhadap suara-suara negatif dari pihak luar, dengan mengatakan bahwa apa yang disampaikan oleh para orang murtad adalah kebohongan yang dicampur dengan kebenaran. Padahal apa yang disampaikan oleh para murtad adalah fakta kebenaran tentang organisasi ini. Dan jika Anda mendengar secara keseluruhan khotbah pemimpin saksi Yehuwa ini, yang menuduh para murtad mencampur kebohongan dengan kebenaran, dia tidak bisa memberikan satu contoh pun apa yang disampaikan oleh para murtad itu tidaklah benar.
I was a senior in high school, and the circuit overseer, which is a traveling minister, advised me that it's best for you to quit school and go into full-time pioneer work because the world is going to end in 1975.
And we felt so strongly about the imminent approach of 1975 and that this whole system was coming to an end that we sold our home in Lower Michigan, moved north, built a Kingdom Hall, and there we intended to live out those few remaining years, having saved just enough money to go a few years beyond 1975. And so it was a great disappointment and distress when this event that the Watchtower had prophesied did not materialize.
I wanted to get married, I wanted to have children, but because the end was so close, when Fred and I got married, we decided that we would postpone having children. So I believe we sacrificed a lot within the organization. Well, when the end of the world didn't come in 1975, and that prophecy of the Watchtower failed,
So I did what any other millennial does. I asked Google. And hey, lo and behold, I found my answer. And a whole lot more. And that brings us to the morning that I woke up. You see, the answer to my question just happened to be on the XJW Reddit page. And I had no idea that that was an apostate website until I clicked the header. And the header took me to the landing page, and there I saw post after post after post that was clearly apostates. But I also saw something else. You see, like all witnesses, I was taught that apostates were these mean, angry, senseless, evil people and liars. And yet, what I was reading didn't fit that narrative. Yeah, some of them were angry, but they were angry for a good reason. I saw heartbreaking posts from people saying they will never meet their grandchildren. Posts from daughters who had fathers that refused to attend their weddings. Posts from wives who had suffered from domestic violence only to have the elders take their husband's side, especially if their husband was an elder, and tell them to be, get this, more submissive. And I saw posts from teenagers who no longer believed in the religion and were afraid their parents would kick them out and disown them. Being a teenager is already hard enough. No teenager should have to have that fear just because they changed their beliefs. These things were jarring to read. You see, on my side, I had seen people get disfellowshipped and leave, but it was just an announcement. Never before had I truly seen the aftermath, the other side of the announcement. The amount of hurt, the amount of people who were feeling suicidal, the amount of people feeling completely lost in an unknown world without any loved ones or friends. This rule that we were told was a loving arrangement to keep the congregation clean was really just a religious version of solitary confinement. Put simply, it became obvious that disfellowshipping was emotionally toxic and mentally dangerous. To completely strip away someone from their entire community and treat them like they are dead is inhuman and the furthest thing from loving. Oftentimes, the people who were disfellowshipped actually just needed support, not punishment and isolation. There was plenty of people who had been through highly traumatic events only to have the tables turned on them and get disfellowshipped. And then you had the posts from people talking about the pressure from the organization, how you never feel like you're good enough. You never feel like you're doing enough. They talked about the way that fellow witnesses police each other. You have to be so careful about what you say because you don't want to stumble anybody. And they talked about the way that they felt the organization had mentally and emotionally held them back in some ways. You could be 25, 35, 45 years old, but mentally you still feel like you're like 16 because they don't allow you to develop that skill of decision making and thinking for yourself. Now, these things were jarring to read because I myself had felt exactly those things, but I knew that I was not allowed to talk about them. And yet here on this website, these people had the freedom to openly share those ideas. Within just a few minutes on that website, not even clicking on anything, just scrolling through the post titles, I was already forced to think about the fact that the organization that I belonged to was responsible for hurting people in so many different ways. And furthermore, I had to face the fact that these apostates that I was told were liars and dangerous people, crazy people, were actually just normal people who had been severely hurt, had their time robbed, had their family stolen, had everybody that they cared about turn their back on them just because they had a different opinion. And some of them were angry, but they were justifiably angry. That went against the whole narrative that I was taught. So I decided to go further. I went to the next page of posts and I found something very surprising. Right there on an apostate website was a picture showing the inside of my assembly hall. And the person in the picture was my friend Wally. Now, Wally runs the channel JW Thoughts, so I encourage you to check out that channel, and he has some really good content on there. But back then, he had a small website where he told some of his story. Now, this guy was what I consider like JW royalty. He was an elder son, pioneer, had just gotten married, and was part of a well-known family within the organization. He was also the first person who studied with me back when we were kids. So out of anyone, I really thought that he had no reason to leave. Truly everything to lose and nothing to gain. So that led me to dig even deeper. The deeper I dug, the more I found. And while still laying in bed, looking all this up on my phone in a private tab, the whole time I was just shaking, sweating. I could hardly breathe. I knew that looking into these things was going against the organization. I mean, I could fly down to Las Vegas and have an insane week and get into all kind of trouble and then come back and I might get disfellowshipped, but at least I can come back from that. But this stuff, there was no coming back from this. I was terrified, but I kept going in. Now, around this time, there was a big thing in the XJW community, and that thing was the ARC, Australian Royal Commission, a special court that was looking into how different organizations handled child protective policies. Surely the witnesses have no issue with that, right? Surely that's a Catholic problem, right? Wrong. The investigation showed that the Jehovah's Witnesses had over 1,000 cases just in Australia that were never reported to the police. Furthermore, the victims of child sex abuse were told not to go to the police for fear it would bring reproach on Jehovah's name and give a bad witness. Everything would be handled within the organization, but only if there were 2 witnesses. When is there ever 2 witnesses with child sex abuse? To go a step further, when these abuse survivors grow up, they are encouraged to forgive their wrongdoer, who may be in the same congregation as them and may even hold a higher position in the organization. And if that's not already bad enough, when these abuse survivors leave the organization after being treated so unjustly, they are then shunned by their families and friends and told that they will be destroyed in Armageddon. Seriously. Even as a ministerial servant, I knew that was wrong. And in this case, these things weren't coming from apostates. No, this was coming from a court. The records were there. The lawyers were there. Even a governing body member was there. So by now, I'm seeing that this quote-unquote perfect organization is not so perfect at all. They have policies that are really hurting people. And furthermore, there's a whole lot of secrets that they are not telling their members. So as I lay in bed, phone nearly out of batteries, still sweating bullets, I'm led to one last website. A website I knew would change everything just by the name alone. And that was jwfacts.com. Now, the best part about JW Facts is that the majority of information on that website comes from the Watchtower itself. There's no need for quote-unquote apostate lies because the organization's own literature provides enough all on its own. There is so much I could say about that website, but I'll just pick the top 3 subjects that really had an impact on me that morning. The first was everything surrounding 1914. Learning that 1914 came from the measurements of the Pyramid of Giza, and that it was originally falsely prophesied as the year Armageddon would come, showed me that there was some major holes in the 1914 doctrine. The second big bombshell for me was the JW's involvement with the United Nations. Throughout history, and in recent times, the Watchtower organization has repeatedly criticized other religions, particularly Christian-based religions, for having any association with the UN. And yet, in 1992, the Watchtower became an NGO with the United Nations. NGO meaning non-government organization. The Watchtower claims they needed to attain the NGO status in order to have access to the UN library. Funny enough, since 1946, the UN does not require NGOs to become associated to have access to their libraries. Yeah, alibis ain't matching up, BS is catching up. Think about that one. The third subject that was really jarring was the existence of the Elders Book, a secret book that the majority of non-elders don't even know exists. Now, this was bothersome because the organization tells its members that there are no secrets. In fact, they criticize other religions for having secrets. It's also significant because the Elders Book, called Shepherd the Flock, is used by elders during judicial meetings to determine if a person should be disfellowshipped, reproved, etc., etc. Now think about it. If you commit a crime and you're taken before a judge, that judge will determine your punishment based off of laws that are publicly available. There's no secret law book. This means that you as an individual have the power to look up the laws to make sure that you are getting judged in a fair way. Now, in a JW Judicial Committee, you do not have that right. You are being judged by a law book that you probably don't even know exists. That morning was just the beginning of my waking up process. But that morning certainly did turn my whole reality upside down. And more importantly, that morning made me realize a lot of things. It made me open my eyes. And it certainly changed everything from meetings to service, even the way I viewed the elders. There were some elders that used to be intimidating, and now they were just old men in suits. When I did my first talk after waking up, and I looked into the audience, I could see the emptiness. I could see the fear that they weren't doing enough. The fear that if Armageddon came tomorrow, they don't know if they would make it or not, because the Watchtower organization had done such a great job of making them feel that they're never doing enough and that they're always sinning. They call the process of learning the real truth about the truth waking up. And I can see why. That's exactly what it feels like. It's very jarring. It's very strange. In some ways, it's pretty traumatic as well. But at the same time, there's also this part of it that feels almost comforting in a way. Because for a lot of us, there were certain things that just didn't add up, and you pushed those things out of your mind. But now, it all just makes sense. So that's the story. Thank you so much for watching.